They thought betraying you would destroy you. They believed walking away would leave you broken, waiting, begging for answers. They smiled as they turned their back, convinced they had the final move. But what they never realized is that the moment they lost access to you, they also lost the protection that came with your presence. Their mask slipped, their illusion shattered, and life in its quiet way began keeping score. You didn't scream, you didn't chase, you simply disappeared and started rebuilding everything they thought they had destroyed. And now you've become the very person they swore you would never be, unshakable, untouchable, and far beyond their reach. This isn't just a story about betrayal, it's a story about transformation. Today on Stoicism Breath, we explore what really happens when someone betrays a good person, and how life itself delivers a lesson far more powerful than revenge. Think about it. People who betray rarely look back. They walk away assuming they've won, assuming you're left behind shattered and ashamed. But what they don't see is the storm they've started in silence. Not a storm of rage or chaos, but a quiet one. The kind that builds slowly, steadily until it turns into strength. Betrayal doesn't just hurt, it rewires something inside you. And it always comes first from those closest, never from strangers. That's why it cuts so deeply. They once held your trust as something sacred and then dropped it like it was nothing. That's what makes betrayal so crushing. It's not only about what they did, but about what it made you question your love, your loyalty, your worth, even your own judgment. Maybe you've been there sitting alone asking yourself, how did I not see it coming? Was I blind? Did I deserve this? But the truth is, you weren't naive. You were genuine. You didn't fail, they did. They failed to honor the space you gave them. They failed to rise to the level of your loyalty.
The Stoics remind us pain is the first teacher. Marcus Aurelius once said, "If you are distressed by anything external, the pain is not due to the thing itself, but to your estimate of it." In other words, betrayal doesn't define you. What defines you is how you respond to it. You can let it break you or you can let it build you. The Stoics chose the second path. They didn't seek revenge, they didn't wait for closure. They used the pain as fuel to carve a stronger, wiser, quieter version of themselves, one that could never be touched in the same way again. Maybe that's your story too. Imagine this. You gave someone everything, your time, your honesty, your energy, and then one day they vanished, or worse, they turned against you. They told others a story where you were the villain. Suddenly people you thought were friends disappeared. No explanation. No chance to defend yourself, just silence. Cold, calculated silence.
You sat there in the ashes not only of the relationship, but of the illusion. The illusion that love always protects. The illusion that loyalty is always mutual. The illusion that good people don't get hurt. And what did they expect? They expected you to beg, to chase, to drown in sadness, to spiral into weakness. But what they didn't expect was that you would rise. And not with noise, not with bitterness, but with clarity, with self-respect, with silence as your strength. You came back not to them but to yourself, because your power was never in the reaction. In Stoic philosophy, the highest virtue is not brute strength, it is self-mastery. And when someone betrays you, your greatest power is not in retaliation but in restraint. You didn't lash out, you didn't post in anger, you didn't try to expose them. You sat with your pain, you let it burn, and then you allowed it to transform you. That's the kind of pain they never see, the one that turns into presence.
The one that turns into purpose. And here's the twist: that pain was necessary. Because without it, maybe you would still be shrinking yourself just to make them feel big. Still giving to someone who was quietly draining you. Still explaining yourself to people who were never listening. Their betrayal was the cut, but it also freed you. It ended something that was holding back your growth. And that's why in the end it wasn't the end at all. It was the beginning. Their betrayal may have felt like a blade, but in truth it was cutting away the cord that was choking your growth. That is why you should not regret the pain or wish it away. Honor it, because that pain marked the beginning of your rebirth. One thing must be clear from the start: their betrayal was never your fault. It was not because you were too much or because you were not enough. It was because they could not handle the light you brought into the room. People do not always betray because you failed them.
They often betray because you stopped being easy to control. The psychology of betrayal shows that it rarely comes from hate. More often it comes from fear. Fear of your growth, fear of your higher standards, fear of your stability. Some people are addicted to chaos. They thrive on drama, manipulation, and codependency. And when they see you thinking for yourself, speaking for yourself, and setting boundaries, they panic. You become unfamiliar to them. You become a mirror reflecting the parts of themselves they are not ready to face. Instead of confronting that truth, they run. They sabotage. They betray. Their actions are born from insecurity, not from your identity. Remember, this someone else's disloyalty is a reflection of their character, not a measure of your worth. You may have been kind, generous, and supportive. You may have shown up, stayed loyal, and even given second chances. Yet they still walked away, or worse, stabbed you in the back. It is easy in moments like that to think, maybe I am the problem, maybe I cared too much. But the truth is you cared correctly. They simply did not have the emotional capacity to value it. You were real in a world that often rewards the fake. You were steady in a world that thrives on chaos. Your consistency threatened someone who lived on instability. Think about the story of a lifelong friend. You grew up together, shared struggles, supported each other in hard times. But as you began to change, to improve, to level up your habits and make healthier choices, the dynamic shifted. You stopped gossiping, you stopped repeating old emotional loops, and suddenly they pulled away. Why? Because your growth made them feel left behind. Not because you diminished them, but because they refused to grow with you. One day they ghosted you. Or worse, they spoke behind your back. They framed your growth as betrayal when in reality it was their envy and loss of control that pushed them away.
The Stoic perspective is simple. Do not take betrayal personally, but do take it seriously. Epictetus once said, when someone acts badly, it is because they have judged it to be right. In other words, people often betray not out of cruelty, but out of ego. They convince themselves it is justified. Perhaps they thought you are too good for me now, so I will hurt you before you outgrow me. Or perhaps they grew tired of being compared to your progress. Whatever the reason, their decision was about them, not you. In time, you begin to see betrayal as protection in disguise, a filter removing those who cannot sit at your table without poisoning the food. They were never meant for your next chapter. Their betrayal was not the ending of your story. It was an edit, a necessary subtraction for your protection, not your punishment. And when you stop clinging to the question of why, when you let go of the need for closure, you step fully into Stoic wisdom.
You understand that you may never hear them admit they were wrong, and that is perfectly fine. Because healing is not about their apology. It is about your decision to move forward. You do not need their apology to heal. What you need is your own decision to stop bleeding for people who cut you without remorse. The next time you question your worth because of betrayal, remind yourself of this truth. They did not betray you because you were weak. They betrayed you because you were becoming stronger. In every healing journey, there comes a moment when you realize you no longer need to argue, explain, or even demand closure. Instead, you go silent. And that silence is not weakness. It is not avoidance. It is power. Because when you stop engaging with chaos, you stop feeding the very thing that was draining you. Why do narcissists and toxic people fear silence so much? Because for those who crave control, your silence is the ultimate threat. They thrive on your reactions, your emotional outbursts, your desperate attempts to be understood. Every time you defend yourself, they feel powerful. But when you go quiet, they lose their grip. They cannot manipulate what they cannot hear. They cannot twist words that were never spoken. They cannot control a mind that refuses to play their game anymore, and that terrifies them. Silence turns you into a mirror they cannot handle. When you go quiet, you stop providing distraction. You stop covering up their emptiness with your energy. Suddenly they are left alone with themselves. No one to blame, no one to provoke, no one to project onto. It is like putting a narcissist in front of a mirror, but this time, instead of seeing their reflection through your reactions, they are forced to face the truth they have been avoiding all along. And the reality is some people would rather shatter the mirror than face it. Think about a moment you may recognize. You get a text full of accusations, or a call designed to bait you into defending yourself, or maybe a message from someone who suddenly remembers your worth only after you stop responding. For a split second you feel tempted. You want to craft the perfect comeback, the flawless explanation, the argument that finally proves your side. But then you pause, you put the phone down, you breathe. You let the silence speak for you. That choice is growth. That choice is self-mastery. And believe me, they feel it deeply. The The Stoic approach has always been simple: say less mean more. Epictetus once said it is not things that disturb us, but our interpretation of their significance. In other words, your peace is not disturbed by what someone says. It is disturbed only when you choose to internalize it. Every time you respond, you give weight to their words. Every time you stay silent, you strip their power away. The Stoics were never passive, they were intentional. They did not react to everything. They chose to respond only when it was aligned with virtue, with logic, and with self-control. That is why silence is not avoidance. It is a boundary. Some people no longer deserve access to your voice, not because you are punishing them, but because you are protecting yourself. Your silence says, I will no longer seek validation from those who devalue me. I refuse to fight battles that are not worth winning. I choose my energy over your chaos. That is not coldness. That is clarity. And here is what usually happens when you go silent with a manipulative person. First they mock you. They say, oh, so you are ignoring me now. Then they poke at you. They sneer, guess you do not have the courage to face this. Next they try to guilt trip you, saying after everything I did for you. And finally they panic. They realize they have lost access not just to you, but to the power they once had over you. That is when the game ends, not with revenge, not with drama, but with your decision to stop participating in the pain they created. Silence does not mean nothing. It means everything. Choosing silence does not mean you feel nothing. It means you have felt too much, and now you have decided that peace matters more than proving your point. It means you have stopped seeking justice from people who live in denial. It means you are not here to win arguments anymore. You are here to win your life back. So the next time you feel tempted to speak, pause. Before you reply to that message, before you post that status, before you let your emotions take the wheel, ask yourself this question. Will this response restore my peace, or will it only restart the cycle? If it does not serve your healing, your values, and your emotional intelligence, let it go. Sometimes the strongest thing you can say is nothing at all. They may think they got away with it. The lies, the betrayal, the manipulation. They walked away as if nothing happened, as if your pain was just collateral damage, as if your silence meant surrender. But what they always forget is that life keeps receipts. And karma does not arrive with noise or fireworks. It comes quietly, precisely, and surgically. You may not see it right away, but you will feel it. You will notice it in the way their mask begins to slip, in the way the people they once manipulated begin to question their truth, in the way they slowly become trapped in the very mess they created. Here is the insight from Stoicism. Karma is not magic. It is cause and effect. The Stoics never believed in mystical justice. They believed in natural consequences. Every action plants a seed, and what grows will always depend on what was planted. Seneca said it best, every guilty person is his own hangman. No one escapes the weight of their own conscience. You do not need to punish them. Life already will. When someone lives dishonestly, eventually their lies consume them. When someone betrays loyalty, they create a reality where no one trusts them anymore. When someone treats hearts like toys, they end up emotionally bankrupt, surrounded by mirrors they cannot stand to look into. You will know karma has arrived when they begin to implode. It does not start with fireworks, it starts quietly. Relationships fail, not because of bad luck, but because of bad character. Jobs come and go. Friendships collapse. They keep blaming others, never realizing they are the common denominator. They become haunted by their own reputation, unable to maintain the mask. And eventually they will even try to circle back into your life, because by then everyone else has seen the truth you recognized long ago. You will see the cracks. You will sense the collapse. Not because you wish them harm, but because they offered their own downfall. Consider this real story, a narcissist who believed he had won. He manipulated his partner for years, gaslighting her, undermining her with subtle cruelty disguised as jokes, triangulating her against others. Finally, she had enough. She left. She went silent. She built a life of peace. At first he laughed. He told himself she would come back. She always had before, but this time she didn't. He replaced her, quickly posting pictures of a new relationship, pretending he had upgraded. On the outside it looked like victory, But behind closed doors, everything crumbled. He didn't just lose her, he lost the mirror that once made him feel powerful. Each new attempt to replace her only made it clearer. It wasn't her who was broken, it was him. Years later he tried to return, a message, an apology, a guilt trip, but by then her silence was not a phase, it was a permanent boundary. That was the moment karma arrived, and it didn't look like revenge, it looked like her joy, her growth, her peace. The lesson is simple.
Karma doesn't need you to wait to watch or to celebrate their downfall. That's not stoicism, that's ego. True emotional intelligence means you don't chase karma, you trust it. You let life balance its own scales while you focus on what you can control, your discipline, your boundaries, your self-worth. This is the shift the Stoics teach us, from victim to victor. They betrayed you thinking they had broken you. But what they didn't realize is that betrayal gave you clarity, resilience, and strength. It gave you freedom to rebuild without their chaos. Their karma is watching you thrive in a world where their manipulation has no oxygen. Your peace is the loudest justice. Your silence is your statement, and that will always speak louder than revenge ever could. Your elevation is your answer. You never have to waste your energy proving they were wrong. You only need to show through the way you live that you were always strong.
And the day you stop hoping for their suffering is the day you finally win. Because nothing unsettles a manipulator more than realizing they no longer have the power to disturb you. You do not owe them a reaction, not a sarcastic reply, not a petty post, not even a whispered warning to mutual friends. You owe them nothing. And in that nothing lies the most devastating message of all. They no longer matter. This is the heart of Stoic philosophy. Indifference is power, not passivity. To an untrained mind, indifference may look like weakness, but to the Stoic it is supreme strength. Marcus Aurelius once said you have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength. Indifference is not apathy, it is clarity. It means you no longer allow yourself to be emotionally hijacked by those who thrive on chaos. You see their games, you recognize their manipulation, but you refuse to play. That is not weakness, that is evolution. Let's be honest. The thought of getting even feels tempting. You picture the moment they feel your pain. You imagine the words you might say, the revenge you could deliver, and for a moment it feels satisfying. But what does it truly give you? A temporary high, a fleeting sense of justice, a quick hit to your ego, and then what, you are dragged back into the mud with them, replaying conversations, overthinking, explaining yourself to people who never deserved your truth in the first place. The price of revenge is your peace, and peace is always too expensive to trade away. Consider a real-world example. A woman discovered her partner had been cheating, not just once, but with several people. Overnight her world collapsed, but instead of exploding in anger, she chose a different path. She packed her things in silence. She left without a fight. No public outburst, no revenge, no gossip, no dramatic scene. 6 months later, her life looked completely different. She had a new job, a healthier body, a peaceful home, and she had begun therapy. Meanwhile, her ex was struggling alone, trying to explain to others why he lost someone so valuable. Her silence, her indifference did more damage than 1,000 angry texts ever could. That is the power of indifference. Why does indifference cut deeper than anger? Because it removes the emotional power they once fed on. Toxic people thrive on knowing you still care, still wonder, still check their lives from afar. But when you stop checking, stop wondering, and feel nothing, that is not just rejection, that is erasure. They no longer live rent-free in your mind. And that loss of emotional power is something they can never recover from. You once reacted because you were hurt, because you did not understand why, because you wanted answers. But now you no longer need an apology. You do not need their side of the story. You do not need them to admit anything. You have moved from survival mode to self-mastery, and that changes everything. Self-mastery means you no longer waste time proving they were wrong. You invest that time in becoming more of who you were always meant to be. You let your growth become the loudest answer they will never forget. If you are tempted to get even, stop and ask yourself, will this action heal me, or will it only feed my ego? If it brings closure, peace, or helps you reclaim your power quietly, then it is worth it. But if it is only meant to trigger them to prove a point to win a breakup, pause. Because sometimes the best revenge is not just success, it is not even caring whether they see it. This is the ultimate Stoic principle: control the inner, release the outer. The Stoics divided life into two categories: what you can control, your choices, your thoughts, your mindset, and what you cannot control, how they see you, what they say, what they do. Getting even belongs to that second category. It drags you back into their world, giving them emotional access. But indifference belongs fully to you. No one can take it. And once you own it, you become unshakable. Your peace is non-negotiable. Let them talk. Let them post. Let them act as if they want. Because when the dust settles, when your name is no longer on their lips, you will still be building. You will still be healing. And you will still be rising higher than they ever imagined. Healing means moving forward, becoming stronger, and rising far beyond the battlefield they tried to drag you into. That is Stoic freedom. That is emotional intelligence. That is your new power. And yet they always come back. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but one day. When their silence becomes unbearable, when the mask slips, when their new supply runs dry, when the weight of their own emptiness grows too heavy, they will reach for the last place they felt in control. You. They will send a message out of nowhere. They will stumble across an old photo and suddenly try to remind you they still exist. But here is the shift. You have changed. When you see their name pop up, you do not feel hate. You do not feel fear. You do not even feel anger. You feel nothing. That is why narcissists and toxic people always circle back. Let us be brutally clear. They do not miss you. They miss the access to you. They miss the emotional reaction, the validation, the control. You were once the mirror that reflected the illusion they built for themselves, and your silence shattered that illusion. When they return, it is never because they have grown. It is because their new source of manipulation failed. They do not come back for love, they come back for leverage. And this is where the power of non-reactivity changes everything. A person still trapped in their old trauma cycle would feel triggered. They would wonder, what do they want now? Should I respond? Maybe they have changed. But someone who has done the inner work, rebuilt their self-worth, and set strong boundaries feels none of that. They do not need closure. They are the closure. Their silence becomes a full sentence. Their peace becomes the gatekeeper. The Stoics teach that the past cannot disturb you without your permission. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Choose not to be harmed and you will not feel harmed." You are no longer the version of yourself they once manipulated. You have upgraded. You have healed. You are now untouchable to the very games that once destroyed you. So when they circle back, it is not your role to explain, to defend, or to revisit the battlefield. It is your role to stand firm in your peace and declare without words, this door is no longer yours to knock on. Consider the real story of Sarah. She spent 4 years in a toxic relationship filled with gaslighting, blame shifting, and constant guilt trips. When she finally discovered the infidelity, she walked away.
For 6 months, she practiced no contact. She built new habits. She created a new life. She developed a new mindset. And then the text came, "Hey, just thinking of you, hope you're okay." The old Sarah might have cried, felt confused, maybe even responded. But this. Sarah read the message, smiled softly, and deleted it without hesitation. Not out of bitterness, but because she knew the truth. There was nothing left to return to. That is the quiet strength Stoicism gives. The ability to close a door without slamming it. Here is the secret narcissists will never admit. They expect you to break no contact. They expect your pain to drag you back. They expect guilt to make you explain. They expect the old leash to still hold. But when you do not flinch, when you do not respond, when your silence holds steady, they panic. Not because they lost you, but because they lost their power over you. They realize you have become something they can no longer manipulate. A peaceful, grounded person with emotional intelligence and unshakable boundaries. That truth terrifies them, because you are no longer who they betrayed. That version of you, the one who tolerated too much, explained too much, forgave too fast, is gone. Now you value your inner peace above external validation. You prioritize discipline over chaos. Not every apology deserves a response. Protect your energy as if it is sacred, because it is. And when silence is no longer a tactic, but a way of life, you will have stepped into the most powerful form of freedom. You do not need to punish them. You do not even need to remember them. They will live with the memory of losing you, while you live with the peace of never needing them again. Letting go is not weakness, it is mastery. You do not need to hate them. You do not need to win the argument. You do not need to warn the next person. You simply move forward, calm, focused, and unshaken. That is how you win.
Not by going back and proving anything, but by building a life too high for them to reach. That is emotional intelligence. That is psychological resilience. That is stoic self-mastery. You did not destroy them. You did not expose them. You did not even try to get back at them, and yet they are falling apart. It begins quietly. Small failures, fractured relationships, a reputation that rots from the inside out. They told everyone you were the problem, but now they cannot hold anything stable because the storm was never you. The storm was always what they were hiding, and now life is peeling back every layer. What goes around starts within. You do not need mystical karma for reality to work. There is something called psychological karma, a natural cause and effect that unfolds when someone betrays what is good, loyal, and true. When someone lies, manipulates, and uses others for their own gain, they create disconnection within themselves. At first it is invisible, but over time it appears in the loss of trust from others, the inability to sustain real relationships, the restless inner voice, the reputation that follows them into every room. They try to bury their wrongdoings under charm, silence, or distraction. But life always collects unpaid debts, not with fire, but with a slow, suffocating unravelling. The Stoic perspective is simple. You reap what you tolerate. Stoics do not believe in magic. They believe in natural law in cause and effect, rooted in human behaviour. Seneca once said every guilty person is his own hangman. Those who do harm are not escaping anything. They are only delaying the collapse. They carry it like a hidden weight, but guilt, shame, and fear are corrosive. They eat away at peace from the inside out. So while you are healing, building, and transforming, they remain trapped in the maze they created. Consider the story of David. He cheated on his partner multiple times. He gaslit her, destroyed her confidence, and then left pretending he was finally free. At first it looked like he won. A new girlfriend, a new job, a new lifestyle. But 3 years later the truth surfaced. The girlfriend left him citing his emotional unavailability. His work performance dropped. Old friends began avoiding him because of his reputation. There was no scandal, no exposure, no public humiliation. Just a quiet, undeniable collapse of someone who thought he could outrun his own character. Meanwhile, the woman he betrayed had rebuilt her life. She had grown into someone even she barely recognized. By the time life caught up with him, she was already free. You did not need to interfere. That is emotional intelligence. You could have exposed them, warned everyone, burned every bridge they tried to cross. But you did not. Because you realized something life-changing. You do not have to punish people who hurt you. Life already does that. And the more detached you became, the clearer it became who the problem always was. People started to see through their charm, to notice their patterns, to ask questions you never had to answer. While you kept growing, they were unraveling. You may never see their downfall posted online, but you can recognize the signs. Passive-aggressive posts about fake people, constant reinvention, new friend groups, new jobs, new stories. Oversharing or complete silence, two extremes masking a fractured identity. Loneliness disguised as self-focus, and deep down an emptiness they cannot explain because they gave up something real for ego. And life does not reward that. Your peace was the real payback. The opposite of revenge is not forgiveness, it is peace. And peace is loud. It echoes when people see you calm, grounded, successful, without drama, without needing to clear your name. That kind of peace forces others to confront something brutal they were never prepared for.
The pain of irrelevance. The pain of watching someone they thought they broke become someone they can no longer touch. The universe is not blind, it is patient. The game was never about exposing them. It was about rising so high that they exposed themselves. Your strength did not come from beating them. It came from refusing to let them change who you are. That is the ultimate reversal. They betrayed you, but you became stronger. They thought you would fall apart, but it is their life that is unraveling. Now you are free. They are haunted, and you never lifted a finger. They may have mocked you when you stayed quiet. They may have dismissed your kindness. They may have taken your generosity for granted. But the one thing they could never steal was your dignity. They may have tried to stain your name, but they could not touch your character. They may have played with your emotions, but they could never reach your essence. Because dignity is not something you hand away. Dignity is something you reclaim. Let's be honest. In the chaos of betrayal, you may have done things that left you ashamed. Begging for clarity, explaining yourself too much, taking blame that was never yours, crying over someone who never deserved a single tear. It happens. It does not make you weak, it makes you human. But here is the transformation. When you finally walk away, when you choose silence over drama, when you choose peace over chaos, you begin to collect your dignity piece by piece. Every boundary you enforce, every message you ignore, every moment you choose yourself, each one rebuilds your dignity, not with anger, not with ego, but with stillness, clarity, and self-respect. Dignity is the currency of emotional intelligence. It allows you to walk away without burning everything down. It allows you to let them talk while you remain silent. It allows you to be misunderstood and yet unmoved.
It gives you the strength to stay quiet when proving your point would cost your peace. Silence is not for revenge. Silence is for protection. You no longer need to be seen as right. You only need to be at peace. The Stoics put it simply: self-control is strength, right thought is mastery, calmness is power, and dignity is the vessel that holds all of them together. After the storm, a new version of you emerges. Quieter, more grounded, more focused, less reactive. People notice it. You no longer engage in gossip. You no longer respond to every provocation. You are harder to reach, not because you are bitter, but because you are selective with your energy. You stop defending yourself because you finally realize you do not owe anyone an explanation for choosing peace. You stop performing, stop over-explaining, and start living from a place of deep self-trust. That is what makes you unforgettable. Not how loud you shouted, but how gracefully you rebuilt. Take the story of Elijah. He worked in a toxic environment, constant gaslighting, undermined at every turn, excluded from decisions that mattered. He tried to speak up. He tried to be a team player. He tried to earn fairness. But eventually he realized the truth. He was not being mistreated because he lacked value. He was being mistreated because his integrity made others feel threatened. So he did the most powerful thing possible. He walked away. No drama, no final shots fired. Just a resignation letter and a quiet exit. 6 months later, the department collapsed. Key clients left. Turnover spiked. The very place that dismissed him fell apart without him. That is the power of a dignified exit. Your peace, your dignity, your quiet strength, those are the real answers. Elijah was thriving in a new role surrounded by people who valued his presence. But more importantly, he valued himself again. That is the true power of a dignified walk away. They can regret, but they cannot re-enter.
There always comes a moment when those who betrayed you realize they have lost access not just to your time or your attention, but to your very essence. They remember how you listened without judgment, how you gave without keeping score, how you stayed loyal even when they did not deserve it. And now that version of you is gone. You did not become cold, you became clear. You did not harden your heart, you elevated your standards. And even if they apologize, even if they beg, they cannot have the same you back, because the one they betrayed no longer exists. What they can never take is this truth. They may have taken your time. They may have wasted your love. They may have disrespected your trust. But they never took your soul. They never took your growth. They never took your ability to rise, rebuild, and outgrow the fire. And that is what they regret the most. Not simply that you left, but that they can never return.
There comes a turning point in every betrayal story, and it happens silently. Not with confrontation, not with receipts or rants, but with your absence, your peace, your rise. That is when it hits them. They did not just walk away. They became someone who could never reach you again. And suddenly, your very existence becomes a mirror a mirror that reflects everything they lost, everything they wasted, everything they never appreciated. You did not teach them a lesson. Life did. You did not lecture, you did not gloat, you did not send closure texts or moral reminders. You let the silence do the talking. You let your elevation speak louder than any words ever could. That is the beauty of emotional intelligence. You no longer react to wounds from the same place they were created. Instead, you rise and let your new reality make the noise.
And that reality, free of shame, free of drama, free of their access, free of their entry into your peace, hurts them more than any revenge ever could. Your growth becomes their reflection. The same person they once called too sensitive now has stronger boundaries than they will ever build. The same person they dismissed now walks with quiet confidence and deep purpose. The same person they tried to break is now surrounded by respect, alignment, and inner strength. And all they can do is watch from the sidelines they created for themselves. Because when you outgrow the people who betrayed you, you do not need to punish them. You become the punishment. Take Sarah, for example. Her ex belittled her every chance he got. He mocked her goals, treated her as if she were replaceable. And when she finally left, he was certain she would come back like always. But this time she did not. From a distance, he watched as she built her business, strengthened her body, and healed her soul.
Years later, she felt no hate towards him. She did not need to, because she was no longer the same person. He once thought she was weak, but now he could not even face her. Not because she was threatening, but because her very presence forced him to confront everything he threw away. That is the true power of becoming the lesson. You do not need closure when you have clarity. Yet so many people wait for the last conversation, hoping for explanations, apologies, or validation. But closure is not something they give you. Closure is something you create for yourself. It arrives the moment you stop needing them to understand. It emerges when you no longer crave validation. It settles in when you finally value your peace more than being right. Because when your life improves in silence, they feel every step you take forward, even if they never hear your footsteps again. Their guilt becomes their sentence. They may laugh in public, but they grieve in private. Not always grieving the loss of you, but grieving the truth of what they became. Because when someone betrays a good soul, they do not just lose a relationship. They lose the version of themselves who once had access to real love. They lose the version of themselves that once had access to real love. You were the chapter they closed too early, the opportunity they misread, the blessing they mishandled. Now you are gone not because you hated them, but because you finally chose to love yourself more. And what they feel now is not jealousy, not anger, but shame. You become the reminder. Every time they meet someone with your kindness, they flinch. Every time they try to recreate what you once gave so effortlessly, they fail. Because you were never just a phase, you were a mirror, a test, a standard they were never ready to meet. And now your very existence reminds them of everything they still have not fixed within themselves. You have become the reminder they cannot mute.
Your silence is the loudest sound. The truth they will never say out loud is this: I thought I moved on, but they still live in my head and I'm not in theirs. You did not win by being louder. You did not win by being cruel. You won by being unbothered, by letting go, by healing harder than they ever hurt you. And now you're not just the one that got away. You are the one they will never get over. They believed walking away from you would elevate them, that discarding you like an afterthought would raise their status. But life does not reward betrayal. Life responds to energy, and energy never lies. The echo of their choices always returns. From the outside, people may think they are thriving, smiling, posting, pretending to live their best life. But time always reveals the truth, because betrayal is not just a moral mistake, it is a spiritual fracture. You cannot violate someone's trust, manipulate their heart, and walk away clean. Even if no one calls it out, life remembers.
And the bill always comes due. You do not chase justice, you become it. As you rise, as you build a life of peace, purpose, and power, you do not need revenge. Because your transformation is the justice, the discipline you build, the boundaries you enforce, the self-worth you reclaim, the empire you create in silence. All of it becomes a mirror, and that mirror haunts them, because it shows them not only what they lost, but who they never had the courage to become. You became the very thing they never imagined, free, grounded, untouchable. That is Stoic justice rooted in inner power. Stoic philosophy does not preach revenge. It does not celebrate petty victories. It teaches order, character, and the long game. Marcus Aurelius said the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. So you do not react, you do not retaliate, you rise. Because true power is self-mastery. And when they see you glowing in silence, elevating without noise, and immune to their chaos, that is the loss they never recover from. Consider the story of Elena. She had been with her fiancé for 6 years. He cheated, lied, and ghosted her without closure. For months she waited for karma to arrive. Nothing happened. Until one day she stopped checking. She stopped hoping for his downfall and began focusing on herself. She got back in shape, started a non-profit, and found love again, not from someone else but from her own soul. Years later she ran into him. He had gained weight, looked tired, and was stuck in a dead-end job. He tried to smile and said, "I always knew you would be successful." She simply nodded and walked away. That was karma. Not because he suffered, but because she had risen so high that he no longer recognized the woman he once destroyed. This is the ultimate loss irrelevance. No audience means no identity. No control means no power.
No reaction means no relevancy. And once you become irrelevant to a manipulator, their world collapses, because they do not live on peace. They survive on chaos, they feed off your triggers, your confusion, your reactivity. Take that away and they vanish. Not physically, but emotionally and spiritually. They still exist, but not in your world. And that is what they never saw coming. You closed the door without saying a word. You did not announce your growth. You did not perform your healing. You simply became unreachable emotionally, energetically, and even philosophically. And as they scroll silently through your life from a distance, they realize something devastating. You became untouchable, not because they could not reach you, but because you no longer looked back. That is the ultimate power. Your rise was never born out of spite. It was born out of self-respect. Your growth was not fueled by hatred, and it was never about proving anyone wrong.
It was about finally seeing yourself as enough and building a life from that clarity. You do not rise to punish others. You rise because you refuse to stay small just to be loved. And that alone is divine justice. One day they may whisper to themselves, "I should have treated them better." But by then you will be too far gone, too grounded in peace, too rooted in purpose, too alive in your new life for their words to even echo. You will not need closure. You will not need revenge. You will not even need justice. Because you became all free. You did not chase revenge. You chose peace. You did not collapse. You became a storm in silence. And now they remember you not because you were loud, but because your absence echoes louder than your presence ever did. You are no longer the broken one. You have become the warning, the living proof, the lesson to everyone watching. If someone betrayed you, used you, discarded you as if you did not matter, let this moment be your turning point.
Do not seek revenge. Do not fight to prove yourself. Instead, become the person they never imagined you could be. Become untouchable. Become unbothered. Become unapologetically whole. Because in the end, nothing ruins a betrayer's life more than watching you thrive without them and knowing they will never again be part of the story they once thought they controlled. Your voice matters now. Your wisdom matters now. What was the strongest move you made to ensure a toxic person never returned to your life? Was it the boundary you held, the silence that spoke louder than words, or the mindset shift that turned your pain into power? Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to reclaim their strength today. And if this message resonates, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe to Stoicism Breath, where silence becomes strength and healing becomes legendary. This is not just another message, this is your new beginning.